You're traveling around a lot on the road. You're doing a tour right now. You're actually coming to my hometown, New York, in August. They're going to come out and see your show. I think for a lot of people on the coasts, what's going on out in the country is an abstraction, but you're out there seeing it. What are you seeing in America? What are you seeing when you're out on the road? How are people doing? What does the country look like?
I'm always, the country looks like it's hurting. That's exactly what it looks like. If you read Chris Hedges' book, America, the Farewell Tour, that's what it looks like. It's funny. It's Tucker Carlson did his episode number 3, and he talked about this, and he talked about, drive away from your house in 500 miles in any direction. Tell me what you see. How are the people doing?
Right.
And are they in a good mood? Even. And this is the richest country in the world. You're going to find every bridge falling down, potholes in the thing, and people living under. And so that's what I see. And I'm surprised people have money to buy tickets to see anything. I'm always surprised. I was on stage in Cohoes, New York, which is a suburb of Albany.
I live right down the road. If I weren't a dad of 4-year-old twins, I'd have come out and seen you. I live like 8 minutes from there.
You are such an idiot. You fucking live right there and you didn't come see one of the...
No, I'm so sorry.
It's unbelievable. That's such a beautiful theater too. That's the prettiest theater I ever played.
Yeah, Cohoes Music Hall.
I went to school up there. That's why I won't even have a plant. He's got 2 kids. What can I do?
2 kids. My wife works at a hospital, so it's like if she's working, she can't break it. And I don't think I could have brought the kids.
Yeah, no, you definitely could. How old are your kids?
4.
No.
4-year-old twins.
Yeah, so then you'd have to pay money to get a babysitter. But I could have put you on the list and could have saved you that in money right there. So
I could have. The other problem is I moved here 6 weeks ago, so I don't know anybody. I don't know any babysitters.
Oh, you just moved there from where?
From Newburgh, which is a suburb of New York City.
Oh, okay. What made you go there? Because your wife get a job or something?
She got a job up here. So we relocated,
Oh, okay. Well, anyway, next time I'll be back in about 18 months.
I might come with Russ down to Irving. Where are you playing? Irving Plaza? Gramercy.
Oh, yeah, the Gramercy Theater in Manhattan.
I'll go there. I'll make I'll make a date out of it. I'll make a friend and I'll get them to babysit the kids.
Okay.
So that I can come.
But anyway, so I'm on stage in Cohoes and or they say Cohoes.
Yeah.
And so just out of wit, like I got an urge to do some crowd work. And so I just pointed at a guy in the balcony and I said, "Hey, what's your name?" And he said, "Dan." And I said, "What do you do for a living?" He said, "I used to be a union leader at the railroad for 10 years until what just happened and Joe Biden smashed their strike." And he said, "I quit. And now I work for Verizon." And so we had this, I mean, this random, I just pointed at a guy and that's who's in my crowd in Cohoes, New York. And those are the people, those are the stories I'm hearing, right? So I know who these people are. I meet them all the time. I met probably 100 people after that show, personally shook their hands, tried to spread COVID as much as I could. And I just breathed all over everybody. Right. So that's what I'm seeing out there in the country. And I tell people this, I said, capitalism, there was a long time capitalism helped bring people up out of poverty. And now it's the exact opposite. And everyone in the world knows it, that capitalism is what's pushing people into poverty, extracting wealth upward, which is all that happens in neoliberalism. Money never gets invested into people. Money gets extracted out of people. And where does it, and it comes from the workers. It always does. So I don't, but I think people are ready to push back now. I think, so we actually had a conversation with that guy during my show. Like we probably talked for like 3 or 4, maybe 5 minutes during the show. And they're like, "What do we do?" They kept asking me, "What do we do?" Right? That's what people always say. What do we do? And I always point to Christian Smalls. That's what you have to do. You have to organize along class lines, which is what people who vote for Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden will never, ever fucking do, because that means organizing with Trumpers. And they don't understand that the Trumper is not their enemy, that they've been propagandized to think the Trumper is their enemy. The Trumper is suffering under the same neoliberal bullshit that you're suffering under. And they've got you hating on each other over bathrooms because they don't want to give you health care, a living wage. They don't want to end those wars and invest that money back here. And that's what this is all about. And so what I tell people when they say, what do we do? I say, you got to do that. You got to look at your neighbor as your brother, not your enemy. You got to get in the streets with them like they did in Canada, what the truckers did, and you shut down capitalism. When I got to this point, I was saying this, when I got to that point in co-host, the police started fucking cheering. When I said, you got to do what the truckers did, you got to shut down capitalism. They all started, and these people are not anti-capitalists that come to my show. These fucking people, but they are ready. And they just need a leader. And a lot of people thought that was me. It's not. But I'll help that person, you know, a lot, as much as I can. And so I think that's what we need. And that's, people need an answer. And people would go to, you know, see Chris Hedges speak when he would do book tours. And I would see videos of it. People get so pissed off at him because he didn't have a solution. And he's great at outlining what's happening and what's the problem, what's really happening. You know, the flip side of what the corporate news shows you was happening in America. He showed you what's really happening, and people would upset that. And that's my answer. My answer is people have to see their neighbor as their comrade. They have to see their neighbor as their neighbor and not their enemy. They have to see them as someone who shares a common issue. Your neighbor is your ally. Your neighbor is not, but that's what they want you to think. They want you to hate half the country. They want you to think half the country is white supremacists, half the country is fascist. And people love to throw that term around, fascist. People like this. It's funny, I only hear them calling Republicans fascist. That's always interesting to me, because you're just reinforcing this two-party duopoly when they throw that term fascist around. And why did they throw that around? Why did that all become popular? Because they have to pretend that a game show host who never even wanted to be president in the first place is a 10-foot tall monster of unforeseen proportions before, in order to get you to vote for a fucking dead guy who's demented and is your enemy, which is Joe Biden. And that's why we're doing this. That's why you hear fascist, 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 fascist. There's no bigger fascist than Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, George Bush, and right now Joe Biden. There's no bigger fascist, right? The least of them was Donald Trump. People are equating now racist with fascist, which is funny also, and pretending that Joe Biden's policies aren't racist. You know, what do you do when you deny black and brown people health care, a living wage? What do you call that? Well, I don't know. Is that racist? I would call that. And of course, everybody knows Joe Biden is a famous racist. That's the irony. The reason why black and brown people are locked up at higher rates than white people isn't because of Donald Trump. It's because of Joe fucking Biden.
Right.
Anyway, I mean, you had Stacey Plaskett send Matt Taibbi an email threatening him with 5 years in prison based off a segment she saw on the Mehdi Hassan show on MSNBC. If that's not fascism, I don't know what is. I mean, that was our take on that as soon as that came out.
Well, of course.
Absolute fascism.
Yeah. And AOC jumping right on that narrative.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, so maybe he perjured himself.
It's amazing. It's the craziest. I never thought I would see this, but again, this is because the Democratic Party isn't the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party turned its back on workers a long time ago. I would say 1993, and maybe even before that, but definitely then. And that's why so all they have is narrative control now, and that's why the Democratic Party's in bed with the government to censor its critics, and that's what the Twitter files revealed. And of course, the establishment media is going to make it look like that was no big deal, and that's not that. So if the establishment media doesn't say it's a story, then it isn't a story. It's amazing. I go to dinner, you know, with comedians, and I used to think comedians were. I first of all, I was always proud to be a comedian. No kidding, very proud to be part of the comedy community. There was always certain comedians I didn't like, but as you know, as a brotherhood, you know, as a fraternity, I always was proud to say I was a comedian, because we were always the ones saying the thing that you weren't allowed to say. We were always the skeptic and even a cynic, right? But it's just amazing to see in the era of Trump that comedians have totally lost their way, 100%. They're totally contradictory. They become anti-intellectual. They shame ordinary people for thinking and reading. It's the most bizarre thing I've ever seen, and they do it with the most righteous indignation I've ever seen. No matter whose special you watch, they're shaming people for going against the COVID narrative, which was the biggest psyop in the history of man.
That's the whole arts community. You know, we both come out of theater,
Art,
and we often lament that they're all shit libs, all of them. All of them. It's amazing. You thought it was this cool art scene of bohemian rebels, and nobody screams louder to deplatform voices they don't agree with than the artists. It's incredible.
So I thought that I always thought when Hitler showed up that the arts community would stand up against him.
Right.
And they thought they were. They thought that Trump was Hitler, but he wasn't. He's a fucking game show hope. If he was a dictator, when COVID happened, he would have completely controlled the country. What he did was, I don't want to fucking deal with this. I'm going to give it to Fauci, and I'm going to give it to every governor. You do whatever the hell you want.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I had a question. Sorry, go ahead.
The opposite of a fascist dictator. The guy's a game show host, and the reason why he became president is because people won't fucking vote for Democrats anymore because they saw the game. So that's why they had to make Trump out to be a 30-foot tall fucking monster, fascist, Hitler, and Stalin combined. Because if he wasn't, then what? How could you justify voting for Joe Biden? That's the only way, and they're still doing it. And it's sad to see people fall for it. You know, I see Cornel West falls for it sometimes, and but I'm super excited that he's in the race.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about Cornel West, but while we're on the topic of your comedy, I actually had this question for you because now your audience is a very sort of heterodox viewpoint, diverse audience, perhaps more so than it was when you were on TYT. I'm not sure that that's true, but that's the way it seems from, you know, hanging out in your chat and things like that. And so was your audience as a comic out on the road or when you would play, you know, the joints in LA, Chicago, were they always this viewpoint diverse, or did the audience sort of change as times changed and as politics sort of evolved? And has playing to a viewpoint diverse audience, has that made your job as a political comic sort of easier or harder? Because I could see how it could probably go either way.
So what I do in Los Angeles, so when I go out and tour, I'm playing to people who paid to see me on purpose. They like me already. They know who I am. So they're coming out to see me. Nobody accidentally walks into a Jimmy Dore show, stand-up comedy show. But here in Los Angeles, I go up in comedy clubs all the time where the people don't know who I am. They don't know I'm coming. And for me, that's different. It's special. I like it. Not more or less, but I like it equally to playing to people who already saw me, because there's a certain thrill into getting an audience to go along with my way of thinking, right? If I use comedy to get in there, I sneak in with comedy. And when I can do that, when I can turn it on. So I've noticed, so I go up and I do my COVID jokes in Los Angeles, and they always worked, but they are working so much better now. They always worked, but now I got off 2 weeks ago. I got off stage and some of the people in the room stood. Now these are people that didn't know me, right? And so all of a sudden, and it was like this cathartic thing. They couldn't fucking believe somebody was fine, especially a comedian who's been shitting all over anybody who's been thinking for themselves during COVID.
Right.
It was just and so that's how it's been going. So I make sure I go up in front of crowds that don't know who I am, that are politically diverse. Nobody knows who's in the crowd. And I think that keeps me honest, right? It keeps me sharp too. And I don't just want to be preaching to a choir when I do my stand-up comedy, because it is easier when people pay to see you. People are coming out to see me on purpose. It does make the comedy, and sometimes it makes me think like, well, is that actually funny, or they just agree with me? Right. And comedically, it's important to me to actually be funny. And so that's why I do those shows. And so so I hope does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, it was an interesting question. And I think, that was a great answer.
My audience used to be just almost strictly Bernie people. Right. And that was in 2017.
Right.
And then it's slowly started to turn. As the Democrats started to get even worse, you know. So a lot of those people stayed with Bernie. That's the problem, is that the people who followed Bernie, which was half of the Democratic voters, half of the Democratic primary voters in 2016, half of them supported Bernie Sanders.
Oh,
half
yeah.
of them. Half, so that would be half of the people who vote Democrat supported Bernie Sanders. They were sick of the two-party duopoly. They saw through the corporate news. They would chant CNN sucks at Bernie rallies. That's all over. That they don't have any criticism for the Democratic Party, for Joe Biden, for corporate news, for fucking anything. It's all about red man bad, or Donald Trump, corrupt fascist.
Most dangerous.
Yeah, most dangerous, corrupt. And it's like it's the craziest thing. So Bernie Sanders turned on his own fucking message. Those people don't know what to do or where to go. And so they hear me saying critical things of Bernie Sanders and they get their fucking feelings hurt. And I say half those people finally woke up to Bernie Sanders being a fraud, which he is. And so it's funny. So I would say when you come to see my show, it was just the other night I was in Hartford, Connecticut, and the manager's like, I'm really curious to see what your crowd is like. I go,
it's funny. I live 10 minutes away from Hartford, Connecticut.
I said, you're going to see hippies. You're going to see businessmen. You're going to see young college kids. You're going to see senior citizens. You're going to see black people, white people, Mexican. You're going to see all kinds of people. And just like if you went to I was in Philadelphia one time, and there was a table full of Hasidic Jews at my show.
Wow.
So I do get a diverse. And so that always made, when I would go see George Carlin, I remember that was the thing that stuck out to me from when I saw him the first time, was his audience, not his act. It was the audience. I couldn't get over it. There were fucking all kinds of people. And that's exactly the kind of audience I've curated or developed. And I'm really couldn't be prouder of it. Just, I was in Hartford, Connecticut. I just love it when these giant men, I'm not the biggest guy in the world. These giant men tower over me and they'll say things like, Jimmy, I'm a conservative. And I go, okay, that's okay. He goes, no, I mean it. I'm a conservative, but I love you. And they know they don't agree with me, but they love the fact that I'm willing to tell the truth. And that's all they want. And that I don't hate them. I don't see them as my enemy. Right. That because I disagree with them about healthcare or whatever, I don't call them a white supremacist neo-fascist. Right. I don't fucking play that game. These people are regular people. Don't even know what the fuck neo-fascist means.
Please clap.